go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ask You Anything presented by Moser Consulting. In this episode, man, this is one I've been looking forward to for weeks. I'm hanging out with one of my favorite people at Moser Consulting, Chris Eckstein. Woo woo! And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be talking about backlogs, and we're going to be sampling my favorite drink, bourbon, while we do that. This episode, I've got some kind of strong feelings that there's going to be some notes of prioritization, some hints of trade-offs, but you know what? It's always going to end with a smooth delivery finish. What do you think of that?
That's exactly what I'm thinking too. So,
Awesome. So I mentioned I'm Marc Brickley. I'm a director of application development at Moser Consulting. My specialty is definitely in the product area of taking your dreams and making them reality in the software. And Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
sure. Chris Eckstein, I've been with Moser 2 years. I am a senior consultant and I am a program and project manager, specifically supporting our work with the state of Indiana most recently. So,
Nice. So is this a good point to start with the bourbon before we get into the serious
where's the
stuff?
bartender at?
Nice. Should we introduce our bartender here?
Hey everybody, producer Brian, also bartender Brian this week. So I will be doing the pouring while they do the talking.
And what's this first one we got here?
This first one is a contribution from Mr. Brickley. It is a Woodford Reserve Distillers Select Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. It is 45.2% alcohol or 90.4 proof.
So this is one of my go-tos. Woodford, you can definitely have it straight. You can have it on ice, but you know what? You can make a mean old fashioned with it. This is one of my favorites. Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is probably one I like a little bit better.
I also second the Woodford Double. Oh,
Yes.
that is one of my favorite bottles
Yes.
altogether, as well as the Woodford. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. When it came out, it was like $40 a bottle, and then now it's gone up to like 60, 65. I try to find the good ones for 50 and under. That's kind of like my challenge. But,
Hmm.
bourbon's good stuff. We're going to keep talking that, but how about we get to the topic of today's episode more? So we mentioned a couple terms: program manager, project manager. Something that I do is product manager. Those are all different names or roles that can be abbreviated as PM, but they are different things.
Absolutely.
It might be good to kind of talk about what those roles are and kind of help our audience understand how they fit together because there's actually places for all of them. Chris, would
Sure.
you like to talk about program management versus project management?
Yeah, my definition of program management is a compilation of multiple projects that could be linked together or totally separate and dispersed under a single manager who then orchestrates the completion of those projects. So that's sort of my definition of a program management or manager scenario. And a project manager is taking a single task. You know, you've got a stakeholder, you've got your charter, scope, budget, built your work breakdown structure in your project, and you're executing the delivery of that project.
Cool.
So,
So, what I hear you say is program manager is an aspect of scale, essentially.
correct.
If you have a smaller project, smaller team, smaller initiative, project manager is all you need. But once you get to much larger items, maybe a larger company, a larger team, that's where that program manager comes into play, not just from a project perspective, but what are some of those other advantages of having a program manager?
So one of the things that I've experienced in my career is you become engaged with the other business units of an organization. Sort of cross-functional is a term I've heard used and seen used, is that I might not be working strictly with IT. I might be working with security. I might be working with procurement. I've done some mergers and acquisition in my past as well, where we worked with all of those different, cross-functional teams to ensure that a company that was acquired was integrated into the parent company. So that was a program, definitely a program in terms of making sure that all aspects, those projects, you sort of managed each one as a project, were done. But they couldn't be done without that interaction with the different cross-functional teams in the business.
And for me, that's very key when it comes to then jumping into what I do more of product management. That a big difference between product management and project management is project management goes more into that cross-functional, that coordination of more different disciplines working together to achieve something on a timeline. Usually product management, you can definitely have product managers when it comes to hardware items, but usually in industry, people use that a lot with software. And that might be in a product-led company where what you're doing is that is your business, that product. So what a product manager is doing is they're focusing on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Are we trying to increase market share? Are we trying to get in a different market? Are we trying to increase our daily active users? What's going to really move the needle with those outcomes? And then once we decide this is what's most valuable, then it goes into that project management to how do we execute it?
Yeah. How do you deliver it?
Because if you could have the best laid plan out there and the best strategy, but if you can't execute it, it's worth nothing, right?
Yep.
So those roles go hand in hand and they help each other. But understanding those differences is very key because Chris and I are going to have a few different experiences as we go through it. I am curious, have you ever run into problems with people confusing those roles? Program manager, project manager, product manager.
I would say folks, individuals outside of IT have can have a more difficult time understanding that because they're like it's all the same thing.
Right, right.
And when you get down to the discipline, each discipline and what it takes to execute in each of those roles, it is very different. And the skills you have to deliver are different than someone outside IT might realize.
Yep.
So
I agree with that. I actually wrote an article on my blog recently talking about Agile and how that's different. That there are some people who are just wired, they're not going to succeed in Agile because there are people who crave structure or they need to have that plan. And maybe that's intrinsic to how you grew up, or it's just you like to be efficient. So let's make sure we have things detailed so we can execute it. Other people, they like that chaos, they thrive in it. So some of those differences in culture from a product management and agile framework versus a project management can benefit the employees based on their mindsets. It's not necessarily like one's bad or one's good. It's what works for your team, what works for what you're trying to do. There are times where I absolutely need a project manager. And again, it goes back to that cross functional because when it comes to items of success, when we get to program management as well, if you're releasing a product, even if it's software, you know what? You need to have people trained. You need to have your support staff be ready to be able to pick up the tickets. You
mhm.
need to make sure QA has their items done. If you are in a regulated industry, you need to make sure your documentation is done and everything's signed off. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of coordination. And I'm happy to have people who are willing to take that stress load on. So I appreciate you, man.
You're welcome.
And this might be a great time to call our bartender back in. What you
I
think?
think it's looking like we need to sample the next
Yes. I am a
round.
quick sampler myself.
All right. Coming up next, we've got a two times oak by Dixon Deadman. It is an American oak Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey at 92 proof.
Always like a good Kentucky bourbon there. So I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. So been around bourbon my whole life. Didn't really start getting into it until about 5 years ago, though, that much. But better late than never is what I say. So cheers.
Cheers. This is a bottle I brought, and it is similar to what you mentioned, the double oak. When this first came out, it was a $35 bottle. And now if you can find it at 45 to 50, it's a deal.
It's a
Right.
deal.
Yeah, it's just really smooth and a good pour. So you mentioned agile earlier. That's one of the things that was in my mind about product development, more agile software as developing software. And whereas your traditional infrastructure project managements are all waterfall.
Yes.
So you have that when those two groups have to come together and deliver a product or a program or a project, right? That's the most challenging environment to how do you make that connection between the agile, we've got a 2 week window to do this work and you've got to do this and you can go to backlogs and things like that, right? Then a waterfall is like, yeah, we slipped the project. We've got approval or there's scope creep. So it is much more Wild West kind of feeling sometime to that. And when those two worlds sort of collide, it can be I won't say fun, but a unique opportunity to manage that. So
It does. I can see that. So I've experienced that quite a bit. So before I came to Moser, I was in the defense industry working on software for military aircraft. And oftentimes we had hardware upgrades along with the software upgrades. Okay. And we had, I think it was like 19 different subsystems on the aircraft. So you had to make sure they all played well and they all used a universal bus to communicate with each other. And lots of different vendors, and that was the world that we lived in. And my project engineer that we had loved him because we just trusted each other. That's the big part. Trust, working together. He would tell me what he needed. This is what we need, and buy. He's like, make it happen. And then he empowered me to go do it.
to
And
go
I
do
worked
it.
with our team. If there were problems, we bubbled it up to our project manager saying, okay, here's an issue we have. Maybe we need to slip the schedule a little bit. Is that possible? Or maybe are there some non-essential features that maybe we could do a later release? Can we reduce the scope? What is really critical to deliver based on what we need to do? And that collaboration is what was really key.
Yep, agreed.
So you brought this one, so I know you already like it. I was gonna say I like it. It reminds me of a Starlight Distillery bourbon that I had before. It's got a similar taste note. So I'm wondering if maybe they're finished in the same way. Is this finished in a different type of barrel?
American oak.
Just American oak
Mhm.
straight through?
Yep.
Interesting.
They have 4 or 5 iterations out commercially, and this is the lowest price point. I've not tried the higher price point ones yet, but it's a nice sort of everyday, want to have end the day and enjoy and relax. That's one I'll go to if I've got it. So yeah.
Cool. Well, this episode we're talking about backlogs. That's kind of the main thing we're getting there. So the term backlog means several things to me. I'm curious, Chris, what does the word backlog mean to you?
Oh, trying to think. I'm thinking of it based on some recent experience, and traditionally it would be different. So backlog to me would be not a feature set so much, but maybe a function set in the data center infrastructure world where it'd be really nice to have something, but it's not required to deliver, your basic or your core deliverable. So that to us, we would put that in a parking lot or a backlog list. And as the project went along, if we thought we had bandwidth, or if the scope got to the point where we could pull additional work in, we'd go to that backlog or to that parking lot and look at what's on the list. Do we have the opportunity to pull it in? And then and I've learned early on you can't do that in a vacuum. As you mentioned, you have to go speak to the team, the whole team, not just the team of the project that's delivering. So hey, we're thinking about this. What's the impact to you? So whatever else that we're doing to support a launch or a deliverable. So that's my definition of a backlog from my traditional experience. From a product and application perspective, I think it's different.
It's a little different. It's similar for me in product. Backlogs are separated into two levels. So the highest level, there's multiple names for it. The name that I like is the opportunity backlog. This is where you generate a roadmap, and that's aligned, I feel, more with what you're talking about there, that there's lots of things that you can do, but you don't have infinite money, infinite time, infinite resources. So
Yeah.
you have to make decisions.
Mhm.
Okay. So that opportunity backlog is all those great ideas, but then you rank them in some way. What's going to give us the outcomes we want? What's the cost? Because maybe the cost versus benefit doesn't really work. Maybe something aligns with your strategy, maybe it doesn't. And then you create a roadmap where you mentioned parking lot. There's a number of things where you're just consciously saying, yeah, we're not even going to worry about this right now. I have 100 ideas. We're focusing on 5.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Then once you have that and you have your roadmap, those big ideas that you have, that might take a team 3, 4, 5 months to actually implement. You need something broken down further into actually actionable items that people can go out and work. And I'm a Jira user of Atlassian products. That's what goes into Jira. We usually call that the sprint backlog. So you're breaking down into smaller tickets, user stories, tasks, items like that that people can pick up and work, and they all trace to that one high level item on the roadmap. So opportunity backlog is your roadmap, sprint backlog is really what you're working there. And that's the world that I live in. And I feel
Mhm.
like as a project manager, you live in both, right? Because you're taking that high level item and then you're creating that plan, you're putting in the milestones, you're creating your inch stones. Does that
Mhm.
sound right?
It does sound right. And then the one thing we didn't talk about, at least I didn't talk about, is the backlog priority ranking is also important.
Mhm.
So we know what to go after first based on priority. And those priorities are generated from input from the entire team again.
Oh,
It's like what's important to the end user, to maybe to the stakeholder. What do you really want based in this backlog to go first? And then we look at what's possible
right.
and then rank that efficiently. And in the agile world, we did a lot of work with pointing and things like that that would help us rank the the items that we couldn't get to in a sprint right away, but we knew we had to in an overall deliverable.
Now we're in a consulting world, so that is different than like a B2B or B2C world. In consulting, we advise our clients, but in the end, it's the client's money, it's the client's product. They're making that final decision. And it's great when you have a single stakeholder who can just make the decision, but oftentimes that's not the case. Chris, if you have those multiple stakeholders, those multiple voices, and they don't agree, let us know the magic touch you have to get them aligned.
You put them in a room with some bourbon and you have them talk until they come out with a consensus.
I love it. I love it. I think that's his way of saying we might need the bartender to visit again.
This next one is a Legent Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, partially finished in wine and sherry casks.
Ooh.
It is a partnership. It was done by Fred No, maybe familiar to some of you bourbon fans out there, working with Shinji Fukuyo.
So I can tell you some of history on this one, Brian. The parent company is a Japanese company that owns the U.S. Partner here, right? Those are the two master distillers from each distillery, and they came together and created this particular blend, and they finished it in the sherry cask, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Underneath the cork, it says two legends, one bourbon.
This is another one of my favorites that used to be $25 a bottle and it went
Mhm.
to 50 or 60. And I think I found that at Meyer at $37 last week. So I had to buy another one.
Oh, I get that. Yeah. You find something on sale that you like, you buy one, maybe you buy two.
I think they only had one. So
Really picking up the sherry cask.
Yeah, same here. I keep sniffing it because I'm getting a little bit of that there. So with backlogs, Chris, which sorry, going back to the room. I do like this. I feel like I like the one before a little bit better though. I think it's maybe the afterbite some.
yeah, this one has a more, it doesn't have the Kentucky hug as you might have heard it described as it goes down. This has a much smoother, softer finish in the mouth.
I like that. Usually when people say Kentucky hug, that's when they're talking about meeting me for the first time. But I like this usage here. So when it comes to backlogs, people have different philosophies. Some people like to keep it very light. Some people like to keep it very full and complete. What's your preference, Chris, and why?
I like to keep it. Wow, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about it like that. I just typically keep it where what is required to complete the project. So if it is a very full backlog and has a lot of items in it, and I talked about prioritization, that's when I would look at a priority list of what's most important to the team as defined by the team. And if we have a chance to get in the backlog, that's what we go for first.
Yeah.
Then what I always do is quarterly reprioritize.
Mhm.
It's like what has changed? We've delivered this much. We might have gotten into some of the backlog. Do we need to reprioritize? And there's always new scope. I've never been in a project where new scope wasn't introduced.
Mhm.
So you have to factor that in to the project. And you either drop some of the original scope to fit the new scope in, or you have to adjust your backlog accordingly as well. So
Right.
that's how I manage it from my traditional PM perspective is
Yeah.
I don't care if it's big or small. It's backlog. We manage it. If it's bigger, we manage it more thoroughly than if it's smaller.
Okay. I'd say overall, I'm pretty similar as well. I talk about the different levels of backlog. So that sprint level backlog, which is the items the teams are executing on, I like for that to be focused.
Mm-hmm.
What is the approved work? What are we really working on? Because I don't want people squirreling off on things that they're interested in but hasn't been approved or isn't moving the needle forward. So I generally like it light. But if we go to that higher level, that roadmap backlog, I like to have it extensive because you know what? You're going to have a conversation and then a year later, someone's going to come in and be like, I got this great idea. And they want to go off and spend a bunch of time exploring it. But if you can go, oh, it's in the backlog, we already evaluated. It's not even a top 10% item for us. It ends the conversation there pretty quickly and
Mm-hmm.
it gets your team focused back. So it's a matter of like what that level is. But in the end, reprioritization, like you said, that's important. Things change, scope changes. That's part of it. That's part of the agile philosophy. We just reframe it in a different word. We call it learning, basically. That and it's part of human psychology that there's only so much that the human mind can think of in advance until there's something tangible and real. So that's where even in the hardware world where you have prototypes, right? People can function with it and test it out. In software, that's a lot easier. Of course, with AI, it's going to make it even easier to get those quick functioning prototypes out. But it's learning. Once you have something tangible, allows you to think further. It is learning, but in the end, you have to deliver something. So you have to say, what was really approved for this project? What is the scope? What are the problems we're trying to solve? Are we achieving it? And stay focused and just doing your best to deliver the best product for the client in our case, because it's consulting, but the user and get the best value out of the money.
Mm-hmm.
So that is cool. So we talked about stakeholder alignment. We talked about needing to prioritize the backlog, but there's a couple different methods to prioritize. Do you have preferred ones, or do you have like a lot of tools in your tool belt for prioritization frameworks?
Typically, it will have 3 or 4 criteria for each item in the backlog,
Mhm.
and those will have various rankings or weights on them, quote unquote, weights, right? And you'll walk through each one of those items, usually A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the end of the ranking, you go to a formula at the end that calculates for you basically, here's the priority that you came up with. So that's usually a first pass, and everybody gets to think about it, and we give them an opportunity. Is this what you really want? Because we might have discussions where item 3 we thought was item 1, but not when you ranked them. So we do typically go through it twice to ensure that everybody is aligned. You understood the scoring or the ranking, and if we need to adjust, we'll do it a second time. Typically by then it's you can lock it in. So that's my main, and I don't do that just for priority ranking. You can do that for risk analysis and
Yeah.
things like that too. So it's a common tool I've used over the years to do, priority ranking and risk ranking and things like that. So
Yeah. I'm definitely a fan of the formula-based ranking as well. There's a number of frameworks out there. I've had some bad experiences where we've asked stakeholders to just say, rank this 1 through 20. And then what ends up happening is people get in a room and then they argue and argue over why this should be a 7 versus an 8 when we can only do 2 anyway.
well, I'll go back to your question about multiple stakeholders. That's really the answer on how you get them to agree is you get them in a room, we rank things,
Yeah.
and they have to rank it,
Right.
and they have to come to a compromise if there is a disagreement. So that has been very useful in coming up with that ability to have a task list of here's what we're going to go work on.
Yeah.
It's and all 4 of the folks in that and in those cross-functional organizations were at the table in those meetings helping us develop that list based on, criteria list.
Yep.
So ranking.
Yep. So
The bourbon comes afterwards.
speaking of, next one, as I talk about prioritization, and then Brian will tell us what it is when he hands us the glasses. There's definitely several frameworks out there that I know people use. WSJF, weighted shortest job first, is one of them. I'm a fan of the RICE method. So reach, impact, confidence, and effort. and factoring those items in, but I always customize rice because maybe something's a good idea, but it's not a good idea for this product, or maybe it's not where we want to be strategically in 2 or 5 years. So I might have a strategic factor in there. You might also have a very important stakeholder who signs the checks. So maybe they get a special little factor in there where they can weigh in separate from the other
They get a
items.
heavier weight, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they might get a little extra factor, but we still want to make sure it's right, but they're heard. So those are a couple items there. What do we got on store here for us, Brian?
Right. This is an Old Fitzgerald 7 year, no
Nice.
rice, but it is a weeded bourbon, so a slightly different mash bill than the others we've tried before. Weeded bourbons replace the rye
Yeah.
as secondary grain with wheat, so it's going to be a little less bitey, a little softer. I tend to prefer weeded bourbons.
Okay.
And this one, I've seen it for $55. I've seen it for $80. Just your mileage may vary depending on where you shop.
Yes. And I already know because I've had this before, this is going to be a good one. I'm going to enjoy this. I didn't think about it ahead of time, but yeah, since we were talking about rice prioritization, having a sake on tap here for us would have been a good idea.
Or if there's a bourbon that has been aged like or finished, like instead of a sherry cask in like a sake barrel,
Yeah,
maybe we can find one of those for next time.
I like the smell on
Oh.
this one.
Episode 1, I heard. That's great, Brian. Thank you. I'm sure they'll have to find a different topic or a bigger microphone and screen it.
That's a good one. I have to say, usually I don't have bourbon neat. I usually always put a little bit of ice in there. I feel if I had a little bit of ice, just take it down a notch, this would be freaking awesome.
That opens up the flavor. Totally different flavor.
Yeah.
The same pour, just a totally different.
Are you a Scotch fan at all, Chris?
Not so much.
Okay.
I can drink I think it's the Lowerland scotches that aren't so peaty and smoky.
Either lowland or the islands up in the north off are saltier and not as peat smoke heavy. I mean, there are definitely scotches that smell like, to me, it's just like I'm licking an ashtray. And I don't care for the peatier, heavier scotches, but I do like the sweeter.
Yeah. That must
scotches.
be what I like. Yeah, I started drinking those early on. I wasn't a big fan of them. 2019, we were in Louisville doing our first bourbon trail, and Purdue happened to be in the final 8 down there, I think, that year for a couple. That's how I got into bourbon and haven't stopped since. So it's been a great experience.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. And I've been a person, I try to get my kids to do this, not with alcohol, though they're not old enough. But you don't know what you do and don't like until you try. That's how I try to get them to eat different foods effectively. But that's how I've been with beer. That's how I've been with bourbon. I want to try a lot of things. I have my go-tos, of course, but I like to experiment because you never know. There might be something out there that you're missing and you don't know until you try it. So good stuff. So we talked about scope changes and scope increases, Chris. When it happens, how do you manage it without there being drama?
I don't know if there's ever no drama, but
That is 100% correct. I agree with that.
you basically have to, and you have to be very direct with the team that's delivering the project that they cannot accept the scope creep, because that's happened and will continue to happen. So you have to set the rules up, the guardrails up, that someone can bring you a change or scope creep. I'm going to change something. They can bring it to you. You can't execute on it. You need to bring it into the project manager, program manager, whoever that is, and then they will take that forward to the greater team and look at, and number one, validate that it's really needs to be done, is a good idea. You mentioned checking to see if it's already on a backlog list, right? It might already be in a backlog list. We're going to do it.
Yep.
If it gets to the point where it is a valid scope request, it's got the funding, you go get stakeholder approval, because if you go do it without them knowing, that's not a good thing. When they go to your boss and your boss comes to you and they don't know, right? So you got to manage the communication of that as well. So that's how I do it. It's you have to manage how it comes in And then you take it through a process that we've already gone through in terms of developing a backlog, a priority list, launching the project. You bring it in. There's usually a process around doing it when you start the project. So you just follow that process.
Yeah, process communication is a word that I heard you say
Communication's
several
huge.
times.
Yeah.
It is big without a doubt. And personally, I find managing scope changes without drama is sometimes better for a long-term project because you have that ability to form relationships with
Yeah,
people
that's true.
and develop that trust.
Yeah.
If you don't have trust, it doesn't matter what you do. The scope change, you're going to have drama. Someone's going to be upset. So sometimes you got to roll with the punches. Yeah, that's good stuff. So think about backlog. It's not just managing in a plan. Because again, we said you can have the best strategy and plan, but if you can't execute, it means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So in business, there's one question that someone always asks. When's it going to get done? Right? In Agile, people like say, well, it's going to get done when it gets done. We don't know. We're figuring it out as we go. But even in Agile, people still ask, when's it going to get done? So a big part of particular software projects in managing some of that drama and answering that question is demoing progress. Do you have any best practices in executing a backlog when it comes to demos and showing that progress?
I don't know if it's a best practice, but it would be one in particular we just recently did is replacing an aging, out of date, no longer supported software program. And we did stand the new solution up in the non-production environment and demoed it to the client to prove to them this is running on the new solution infrastructure using the new application connected to the new servers that host what needs to be hosted, for the end user, and recorded that and had dev ops folks on the phone and network people on the meeting and went in to show logs. We were really deep into it. And then about 45 minutes, we had that one of the better ones I've seen done that detailed, where we were able to convince them, this is what you asked for. This is what we can deliver. We've delivered it in non-prod. And so that's one way. When it comes to doing infrastructure builds, you could show them. If it's a traditional old-time data center build, that's not so much the same anymore because cloud's more involved, right?
Yeah.
But you can show them progress, based on, I'm going to go the waterfall project management list, right?
Yeah.
Here's where we're at in the list. We could show them, bring something up in the cloud or in a management console. Here's where we're at. So that's sort of the two ways I think of doing it is traditional, show them.
Correct.
I
Yes.
lived in Missouri for 20 years, so it's the show me state.
Show me state. Yes.
You show them.
And there's an old saying, seeing's believing.
Seeing is believing. Yep.
Right. So anybody who's a stakeholder, anybody who's paying for it, even if it's not money, but a vested interest, it's going to impact their lives, impact their job, impact something about them. If you can show them something, that's software, maybe it's physical. Yes, the hardware is here. You can see the wires connected. Give them something that's going to put minds at ease. So all good tips there, Chris. Appreciate that.
Sure.
And do we got another taste lined up? I have a feeling I need to just keep asking, and bottles of bourbon are magically going to appear.
Yeah, they are. He keeps messing with the lineup over there too. It's like he keeps moving them around.
We're moving into the final stretch of the tasting. The final bourbons that we're trying are all from Buffalo Trace, various entry points in their offerings. This one is a 95 proof. This is Old Charter Oak. This is out from this year, about $80 a bottle. This is their kind of more experimental series where they try different types of oak, different seasonings, different things that they do to the barrels. And this is their finest oak, and it was about $80 a bottle this year, if you can find it. Since you guys are doing us a favor, I decided to bring in some slightly higher, harder to find offerings from. So there you are.
I did find that bottle in Florida 2 weeks ago for $450.
Oh my God.
And I decided I'd let it sit there a while longer.
Hard
and see.
hard.
I texted Brian. I'm like, what's that? What'd you pay for that? He told me. I went, oh, I can get it for 450 down here. I said, no.
Now, I will say this one is very oak forward.
Yeah.
First thing,
Yeah.
first thing you get is oak. Like I get straight sawdust aroma.
Yeah.
And this is one that
Wow.
when I'm enjoying this, I like it as part of flights and tastings because if I pour myself a second one, the oak actually starts to overpower everything. And I don't enjoy the second glass. I've found nearly as much as I do the first. So I'll pour one of these and then I will move on. I do like it, but it's not one that I can keep coming back to in a single sitting.
Sounds like an IPA to me in the beer world. So that's how I drink IPAs.
I-
One.
I drink IPAs as I hand them to you. Because,
Yeah, I have to say, I mentioned at the beginning, I like double oak. So immediately when I smell this, like this smells great. I almost don't want to drink it. I just want to smell it. It's
That's really good.
that appealing to me. So I'm
That's
gonna
really
have to
good.
drink it.
every sip you take, I'll tell like to me at least, every sip I take,
Wow.
the oakiness builds. It just keeps
Yeah, it's a
building.
different profile in the mouth. Wow.
Yeah.
So this one's 95 proof.
You still got a little bit in there. Let's toast to Brian for bringing this
Yeah,
in.
thank you, Brian.
Good choice, man.
My pleasure.
Clink over there too.
Thank you.
Me likes. Me likes. Good choice there. Okay, Chris. Something you mentioned before was risks. Okay.
Yes.
So there's different types of risks, there's different ways to manage it. How often, as a project manager, program manager, are you managing that risk, or is someone else a specific risk manager? How common is it to be combined or separate?
I think the project risk log, RAID log, I guess we might call it, right? Traditionally is managed more frequently than a program RAID or risk log. So in a project, I want it looked at least monthly, to ensure that nothing new has come in, or if an existing risk has gotten out of control, or became more risky than we initially scored it as. And from a program management, what I've done in the past is typically sit down with the client and do that quarterly. And it's very hard to get them to come to that meeting because they don't see it as very important. But you got to get at least one of your peers, and if not, usually I like to get someone above them as well to come to that meeting, along with the folks under them, so we all understand this is the risk log, this is how we've scored it. Here's our prog. So by the time we have that meeting, we will have had 3 project meetings. So we have very relevant current status of those risks and the delivery of them. And one of the more famous ones that still exists today is the Windows Server upgrades that happen, or the SQL Server upgrades that happen because of Microsoft support has ended. Yeah. So getting that's one of the more difficult things to get managed in a risk log, because it's not just, I can go upgrade the server, because what's on the server? What's it hosting? What business application or business function is it hosting? Does that have to be upgraded too? Is that compatible to be upgraded? So those are the things that you have to look at to truly understand not just the urgency and the importance, but feasibility. What's the timeline feasibility wise? Can we do it? Can the application group, the developers, what's their current project load? Can they fit it in a sprint somewhere?
Right.
Do you need to spin up a new epic or story to support that? So that's the kind of conversations we have when we look at those things. It's not just like, yeah, you need to upgrade from Windows, 2009 to 16. Now it's 22. Well, what's the impact?
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah, I think you could probably come up with 20 different types of risk if you really wanted to. I have seen that happen. There was a app we used in the defense industry, Risk Register, I think it was a long time ago, where the pull down seemed to be endless. But in the end, having a lot of options doesn't give you clarity. You mentioned feasibility risk. Are there any other really big ones that are important to you? Like getting through all the weeds, what are the things that really matter?
Cost. We didn't really talk a lot about cost.
Yeah.
And schedule, time. Those are 2 of the bigger ones. And you typically, cost can be unknown because you're only really looking at what's the license cost, but what's the total cost to doing that
Mhm.
as well. So it's not just can the dev team pick it up? When can they fit in their schedule? What's it going to cost for them to be engaged? Who's going to pay for it? Right? Which budget's that going to come out of? Left pocket or right pocket if it's, in IT somewhere, or does the business have to come up with that money? So what's the
Right.
priority for them to get off of it? Probably, usually it's not very high because it works. Why do I know I'm not broken? Why do you want me to fix it for it? Right.
Right.
So having those discussions and educational opportunities with the business sometimes is can be challenging.
Absolutely. And that's one of those scenarios where for me it's a very different experience depending on what type of industry and market you're in. If you are in B2C versus B2B, how you approach that is different than if you're in what I call B4B. So we're in consulting, we're building something for somebody else. Someone's already determined this is a valuable item to go do. It supports the business. Or maybe you are in a company and you're part of that IT group that, software isn't their business, it's what powers their business.
Mhm.
So they've already said, yes, this is worth the money. If you're in that B2C or B2B realm, a risk that I often look at is value. Is this a problem that's valuable that someone's actually going to go out and pay for? Yeah, maybe it's a nice to have, but do they really need it? Or they're going to say, oh my gosh, this changes everything. Yes, I'm willing to do $10 a user, or maybe I'm willing to do $1,000 a month. That risk of do we understand the value that we're bringing is something that's important. Feasibility, of course. The easier it is, the less costly it's going to be. You mentioned cost. So that makes things easier. If it's more expensive, yeah, how are we going to manage this? Can we de-risk it in some way? Is there better technology? Can we learn from it? Some other things that I look at are also usability. Sometimes a problem, if it's hard to solve and you don't know if it's going to be easy for a user to use, that's hard in the product management realm. And the last thing is viability. Any of those three together, if they come together, it could be viable if those are low risk items in the other areas. But if you have high risk, any one of those could kill you. If the feasibility risk is high, then the time that it takes to get to market, schedule, and cost, you might have gone past your opportunity,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Just think if you were building a product 3 years ago and you're like, this is going to be great before AI happened. And it was a 2 year project cycle. And then now AI's out there and people are like, well, I can just vibe code
Do it
something,
down.
right? Do it on my own, right? Then it's no longer viable right now. You have to re examine your approach. So risk management is important. There's different ways to do it. And then you got to figure out what's best for you. And there's different approaches. So, do we have another bourbon before we go on to our last two questions here?
This is Blanton's Gold. So this is a high rye mash bill for Blanton's. It's 103 proof, slightly higher proof than Blanton's the regular single barrel. And I think I got the bottle I poured out of this. I think I got it for $150 a couple of years ago. But anymore, you are not going to find it really for less than probably $180 to $200 at this point, unless you're finding it at your local grocery store. And if you are finding Blanton's Gold at your local grocery store, never move. Make sure that stays your local grocery store forever.
Right. So, I will say this does not have as much of a bouquet as that old charter oak. Like I could definitely smell that oak hard. And I
Does
like that.
this
This does
smell spicier to me? You mentioned maybe you put rye in my head, but I smell the spice of it. Oh yeah, I taste that too.
yeah, I taste that as well. Yep,
It's good.
very.
Little hug going down there. That's good.
So with risks, a number of the risks that we talked about, cost, schedule, we talked about feasibility. Those are risks that I would almost consider more technical. But a challenge we have in consulting is some that might be more cultural because each client's business could be different.
Mhm.
Do you experience those cultural risks and how do you manage those risks?
Every program or project I've been on in my career has a dip. Every culture's been different, right? So you basically, if I came in new, I would want to understand what are we delivering. Usually I came in as a delivery leader. So literally give me the contract. I'm going to go read it. Then I'm going to go to the delivery teams and make sure how are we delivering or what are we delivering? How are we delivering it? And what is the relationship with the client all the way up and down? And then start building. Then I would personally start wanting to build those relationships with all of those individuals, usually from the top level, the C-suite. It was usually a CIO, his director levels or VP reports down to the help desk lead, someone working the help desk. Um, so that's what I would do in terms of trying to understand the culture so we could build a relationship.
Yeah.
And I've had difficult relationships with CIOs, a CIO in particular, that we used to work together and be peers. And we did not understand each other's management style until he became my customer. And we just had to agree to disagree on things. But we still, for 3.5 years, I delivered what he needed.
Yeah.
There were some uncomfortable moments, but the best times were typically when we went out after work and were able to talk bluntly with no retribution. Here's where I think you're wrong. Here's where I think you're wrong. How can we get past that and come to a common goal to deliver for the business? So that's it's everyone's been different, and I've had that twice in my career. I was shocked at how slow things went because everything had to be a consensus. One very, very large company, one not so large. But that drove me probably the most, wanting to pull my hair out, even though I do have hair, because I wasn't expecting that. I expected the way they talked, they moved, they wanted to move fast, get things done, and you got into the environment, you understood the culture. Everything had to be a consensus decision. And they didn't move. And when you talk to them about it, that's our culture. It's like then you can't expect the outcomes you want
100%.
based on that culture because you can't move that fast.
Correct.
So,
yeah. Yeah. So that's where like those RACI charts come in handy, right? In the end, who's that final decision maker? If it's always groupthink, yeah, you're going to have progress stalled.
mhm.
Some things you mentioned there, we hit on the theme of communication again.
Yep.
And then you didn't use the word, but when you talked about in the end, I delivered what he needed, you built trust, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So if you can show results for anybody, they're going to begin trusting you, and that's going to open up those lines of communication when it comes to culture. In consulting, which we are, there's going to be clients that we have. Some of them are sales led organizations, some of them are product led. The IT part of it, maybe IT is a service to the rest of the business. Maybe IT, it decides what they do, and the rest of the business just gets what they need. It's always a challenge, and you have to be willing to adapt. Go ahead.
So one of the challenges I like to understand early on, you just mentioned IT as a service. I like to know if there's a chargeback in place for IT. So I know, because if it's not, there's a different way of managing projects and programs versus if there is a chargeback. Because there's a chargeback, the business usually has more say.
Yeah.
In my perspective, my experience. So I can engage with them and build a relationship with them as well without any retribution from crossing a line or,
Right.
I ask permission, but if you go do that, you make sure you do that. So you understand, is this going to meet your requirement? Because you're paying for it, right?
100%. Yeah. If you're paying for it, you got skin in the game there. You should have a say.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue into my next question. I was going to ask, do you have a PM trick or tip you would like to share with people? And you just gave a fantastic one, right? Do you have a second one?
PM trick or tip?
Yeah, to help somebody get through that you just love and you use. Now, I understand if you want to get rid of your secret sauce here and tell everybody, but is there anything you like to help other project managers and program managers with backlog management, managing stakeholders, any of that?
Uh, I'll say the one thing that this was about 6 or 7 years ago at a very large consulting company, and they asked director level and above to help mentor women in the organization. And they're a pretty large Indian company, right? But U.S. based, but Indian company. So I was asked, I was given three Indian women to mentor, and that taught me more about how I mentored and shared with people than I think they got out of it from me, even though it was good communication. But they didn't, I understood their cult. Go back to culture. I didn't know that culture. So I had them explain that culture. So communication, and then we building a plan on what do you want? Do you want a promotion? Do you want to work in a different field? Do you want to, cross train, and giving that launching pad to have the confidence and ability to go do it. And I think I mentored five young ladies. All five of them got what they wanted out of it. And they came back and they're like, "Oh, thank you so much." I'm like, "Trust me, I got as much or more out of this than you did. But, thank you for being that honest and open with me about what your experiences are." Because I didn't understand that culture. Even though I've been in global delivery for 20 plus years, I did not have that in my tool belt. So, um, mentoring is a big one. So in general, but that specific experience, but I will, if I see someone who is ready for that next step in their career and needs maybe a push in a certain direction, I'll have that discussion. You think you're ready? You really need to go fill this gap over here for the next 6 months, and then come back and let's have the discussion. Or if I've had discussions with people who maybe you shouldn't be in IT.
Mm-hmm.
You came from the business, you know this really well. You hate your job. Let's get you back into the business and have you grow your path that way. So those, in terms of, I don't know if it's a project management tip, but more program management tips is
it's
know
all
your
the
people,
people and human.
cultivate, have empathy, listen, active listening, not passive listening. That's probably a big one. Is
Mhm.
I didn't do that early in my career, and people came to me and told me that. I'm like, oh, you're right. I'm not. So remind yourself to actively listen, and have a personality. You know,
Yeah, one of the things that I love about Chris is his willingness to help other people. It's something that truly speaks to my heart. Something that I tell people is if you think about your life, there's probably numerous people throughout your life who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Someone who gave you a chance, maybe when you didn't deserve it. Someone who mentored you because they just felt like it was the right thing to do. Or maybe there was that person who was a friend at the time in your life when you really needed a friend. Chris thinks about other people. He's there to help support them. And I really enjoyed that story there.
you're
So
welcome.
to end it, I think we should have another taste testing
A
here or
beverage.
five. I'm not sure. Whatever Brian's up for.
Moving back into the weeded bourbon world with Buffalo Trace, this next sample is a Weller Antique 107, and it is 107 because it is 107 proof. This is one of my personal favorites. This one, MSRP is around $60, and if you can find it at 60, you should buy it because most of the time you find it, it's going to be probably at least $90, which I still consider okay, but anything above that, maybe the people who are on that store just like looking at the bottles and watching them collect dust. And I'm more than happy to let them do that.
Makes sense to me. Yep.
Now, this is one I've absolutely heard of it because a good friend of mine, Mr. Timberman, is a fan of this, but I've actually never had it. I've had Weller plenty of times, but not Weller Antique. Have you had
I've
Antique
had this,
before?
and it's very different than Weller SR, which is your traditional green label, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's you can definitely tell it's a higher proof than the SR bottle, the green label.
Yeah, this
So
one's some kind called a poor man's Pappy because it's a weeded bourbon,
Yeah.
like the Rip Van Winkle series that is also bottled at Buffalo Trace. Didn't bring any of those in because I don't have any.
Yes, I can understand that. Definitely got the spice on this. Did you get the spice on it?
yeah, yeah.
Definitely strong flavor there. I liked it, but I do have a favorite of what we've sampled so far. Did you have a favorite, Chris?
I did.
Which one? Tell the audience here. You need the visual? Do you
No,
need our
I'm
bartender to
thinking
show the
I like the Charter Oak fair amount. Yeah, that might be the one. I mean, two I brought in I like because I drink them often, right? But so I'll throw those out. But dang, the Old Fitz was good too. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, between Charter Oak and Old Fitz, but I think Charter Oak's just got a little bit, but that's just my natural preference. I like heavy oaked bourbons.
Have to try the Old Fitz another time or two separately just to see the like you were talking earlier before we started, right? Just have different where your palate's at, right? In
Yeah.
terms of the flavor and the profile you're going to pick up. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, definitely get an A+ grade to our bartender over there. Want to thank Mr. Gentrup. Also want to thank our guest today, Mr. Eckstein.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's been a good time. Maybe we'll have to do this again.
I don't know.
Another spread with bourbon. Anything we can think of to throw bourbon, right?
I feel like once people find out we've done this, the next time we put out a call for participants, we're going to get a greater response rate.
Camry's going to have to
Yes.
do one of those random drawings, I think, that she
to
does.
see who, yeah, to
Yeah,
see
who
who
gets
actually gets
it.
to participate.
Now, as a legacy member, hopefully I would just be grandfathered
Yeah,
in.
you're right, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, you get the golden ticket.
Yes, this might be the way to get a permanent host of Asking Anything as opposed to just guest
Guest
hosts.
hosting.
But
Yes.
any episode on the rocks, I am probably game for. But thank you again, Chris. I would also like to thank our listeners for joining us today with this week's edition of Asking Anything presented by Moser Consulting. Be sure to join us next time as we keep diving deeper into the knowledge of our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Please don't forget to share your ideas or topics with us on social media. We want to hear what your interests are, what you'd like for us to talk about. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get our podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.
Cheers.
Go.
That is barrel proof? What is the proofage again?
127.2.
Oh my
No
gosh.
way.
That is joy.
That's dangerous.
That is joy in a glass.
That is amazing.